I grew up in northern Alberta back in the early 80s, and my best friend then was a guy named Mark. We were outside all the time, no matter what the weather was. If the ground wasn't snow-covered, we were out adventuring. Mark's family owned a ranch right on the edge of a huge area of forest that seemed to have no end. My parents would drop me off at his house early on a Saturday, and we'd vanish into the woods until Sunday evening. The only time we'd stop doing this was if we had to be at school. We were obsessed with pretending we were pioneers, two boys living in the wild as though it was the 1800s. We'd build lean-tos from sticks and leaves, try to fish using string and bent nails, even try to start fires by rubbing sticks together, although we never quite mastered that last one. Looking back, some of the greatest days of my life were those weekends. We didn't worry about phones or homework or anything else. It was just us in the woods. By the time we were in our mid-teens, 16 or so, we were moved by the movie Stand By Me. It had recently been released, and we were captivated. We decided we'd do our own version of the story, walk the railroad tracks that cut through the countryside just outside of our town. Unlike the kids in the movie, we weren't looking for a body. We were searching for hidden bridges, rivers to fish in private, and hidden campsites where no one would bother us. We knew that it was not exactly legal to be on the tracks, but we were young and thought we were invincible. We did it several times. Each time brought us to different places, to nice rivers, to ancient train bridges that were apparently forgotten by time. We went fishing, camped under the stars, and played hide and seek from passing trains. We made small fires that we kept low and hidden and spoke long into the night. Nothing ever went wrong. Indeed, the whole experience was storybook-like. We were two teenagers with the freedom of the wilderness at our feet. High school soon ended, and life sent us in different directions. Mark and I both moved away from our hometown and went our own ways. We never lost touch, however. We always made it a point to get together when we were both home seeing family. One summer in the mid-2000s, we were both going to be home for a few days. We both did the family thing during the day, but at night we'd hang out. Sometimes we'd hit a bar, other nights we'd sit in the backyard by a small fire pit, beers in hand, swapping stories from our youth. One night after a few drinks, we were reminiscing about our past rail track adventures. Nostalgia mixed with too much alcohol, and we had the brilliant notion to do it one more time, just like the good old days. A full-day walk, camp overnight, and walk back the next morning. Mark was in straight away, and I agreed with minimal hesitation. A couple of days later, my wife drove us just outside of our hometown, the usual spot that we always departed from. She rolled her eyes the whole time and said we were acting like teenagers all over again, but I knew she was just indulging us. As soon as her car was out of view, Mark grinned and said, "Let's go the other way this time, for adventure's sake." We had a decent map, knew the area fairly well, and figured why not. It was a nice walk. It was fun, a little bittersweet. We stopped on an old bridge that crossed a wide stream and sat for a bit, legs dangling over the side, smoking a joint and watching the water move beneath us. The forest we were traveling through was thick with pines, and you could smell the dirt, still damp from a rain earlier in the week. We didn't have fishing rods this time, only canned goods and snacks, but it did not matter. It was no longer about surviving, it was about being connected to the past again. As the daylight started to fade, we found a great place to camp, a dense tunnel of trees on both sides of the tracks, full and quiet. It was like being in the arms of the woods. We had hammocks on our backs instead of tents, figuring it would be a lighter setup. But before putting them up, we wanted to scout out the area like we always did. Old habits die hard. We went a little over 100 feet into the woods, up a little hill that gave us a better view of the surroundings. We just wanted to make sure we weren't setting up camp in someone's backyard, after all. From the top, the woods stretched out in all directions, except for one break in the tree line. Below, in a little clearing, we could make out something, an old building, just barely visible through the foliage. We pulled over. It did not look like a house, no driveway that we could determine, no signs of recent habitation. We thought it could be a sugar shack or hunting cabin or something. But it was so run down and still, and there was not a single light or any noise. Out of curiosity, we wanted to get a little closer, just to see if anyone lived there. Creeping down the hill, we got closer until we could see more. It wasn't a sugar shack, it was an old abandoned church. The building looked like it hadn't had a visitor in years. The wood was almost black with age, the roof dipping, the window frames bare. A wooden cross, crooked and barely hanging on, still stood at the top. There were no doors, just dark, empty frames where they once were. On the inside, we saw rows of decaying pews and a small raised platform toward the front. It sent a shiver through both of us. The silence in that part of the woods was different, too quiet. We did not go in. We turned and walked back up the hill. Setting up our hammocks on the opposite side of that ridge gave us some comfort, as though the earth itself was between us and the eerie building. The sun was almost down, and there was no time to find another camp, so we settled in, made a small fire, ate, and tried to make jokes about the uncanny sensation. Some time after night had fully set in, as we were reclining in our hammocks, we started to hear something, distant and faint, in the direction of the church. It resembled singing. We both paused, barely breathing. It was far away, but unmistakable. Voices, harmonized, like a kind of hymn. We slid quietly from our hammocks and crouched low, trying to listen more closely. It went on, same rhythm, same pitch. It didn't get louder, just steady and haunting. We crept back up the hill, moving as we had when we were kids sneaking through the woods. The moon was out, enough illumination to see shapes but not faces. When we reached the top and looked down toward the church, we could see a soft flickering light emanating from inside. It was candlelight. And now the singing was louder. The voices were singing something that sounded like church music, but it wasn't in any language we knew. It echoed faintly through the trees. We stayed hidden, watching the building, trying to catch a glimpse of whoever was inside. All we could see were shadows, moving slowly, indistinct. Then the singing stopped. A male voice started chanting, low and commanding, like some old preacher or something. But again, we couldn't discern any words. Then the others would respond, singing back to him. This went on for a couple of minutes, and it built into this chilling, powerful wailing sound that just kept building and building until it was deafening. I covered my ears. And then, as suddenly as it started, it was completely quiet. I was about to suggest that we leave right then when Mark grabbed my arm. People were coming out of the church. We could see them getting into a single file line holding hands. Some had flashlights. The singing started up again, quieter this time, but they were moving in our direction. We didn't wait. We grabbed our things and sprinted down the tracks, feet grinding on gravel. We didn't slow down until we were a long way off. When we looked back, we could see flashlight beams up on the hill, shaking, wobbling, as if the persons holding them were stumbling or searching around. We kept on walking, fast and silent, and only stopped to catch our breath. We eventually reached a road and walked along the road. Our map showed a town further down the road, and we reached a gas station that was still open in about 20 minutes. We called my wife from there and waited in the fluorescent glow of the parking area. Others that we told later said that it was probably a bunch of children playing in a vacant building. But I know what I heard. I know what I saw. Those weren't children. And to this day, I've never been creeped out more by anything in the woods. My boyfriend and I went camping one spring in some wilderness reserve up north in Oregon. I think it was Black Pine Wilderness, but honestly, I no longer have a clue. It was one of those gritty kind of places where you really just tune out. No signal, no Wi-Fi, wind, trees, quiet. We spent a Thursday afternoon there in order to avoid the weekend crowds, but discovered that we had not had to worry at all. Throughout the duration of staying there, I only bumped into 2 other individuals, and the premises themselves were enormous. It was deserted, next to empty actually. As we were pitching our tent and unloading gear, Marcus, my boyfriend, simply mentioned right away that he got a strange vibe from the two people we met. He is usually laid back and chill, so when he does get freaked out, I listen. I don't know if that person was involved in anything that happened afterwards, but I'll keep going with what we did see just in case. The woman was the first person we met. She'd had her truck pulled slightly off the main road, and she had the hood up. She looked as though she was in trouble, I guess. I wouldn't have even given it a second thought, except that Marcus mentioned to me later it seemed fake to him that she was stopping someone by pulling over on the road like she did. He typically attempts to be accommodating with situations like that, but he related that she did something that caused him a strange feeling, such that he did not even desire to make eye contact with her or talk to her. Subsequently, as we were concluding our camp setting up, another individual passed by on several occasions in a rusty old sedan. I didn't mind it at first. I was too busy packing out the food and starting a fire, but Marcus did point out that this was the third time that one vehicle drove by. The first two times, the occupant had slowed down and just stared at us without even an attempt at hello. No smile, no wave, just stares and creeping by of their camp. By evening, the woods felt still in a way that wasn't tranquil. It felt watched. We had a little fire, ate dinner, and crawled into the tent around 10. I lay there for a while, hearing the hiss of embers fading out and the occasional twig break outside. That's normal in the woods, I told myself. Wildlife, wind, but something about that night just refused to let me unwind. And then, around 3 in the morning, we were jolted awake by something. This was this harsh, piercing mechanical sound. I can't even say it was like anything. Marcus later said it sounded to him like a chain gun spooling up, or maybe some kind of industrial machinery grinding rocks. But we were in the middle of a forest with no construction or roads anywhere near us. I woke up, mired, racing heart. Marcus looked out the tiny mesh window of the tent quickly, not to dislodge anything. The sound was repeated, again and closer with each repeated sound, approaching us. I was frightened. My body was cold even though I was wrapped up in my sleeping bag. Marcus whispered to me that it was probably far off, maybe miles away. I believed him then, or maybe I wanted to believe him. I mean, loud sounds carry in the woods, don't they? Well, afterwards he admitted to having lied in order to try and keep me peaceful. He explained that it did actually sound as though it was right along the narrow dirt trail up to our camp area. At one time he believed it was just beyond the trees, even possibly right outside the tent. He didn't mention a thing then because he thought maybe someone or something was trying to lure us out intentionally. He was constantly whispering to me to go back to sleep, and that's a sign. Marcus only whispers if there is a real reason. I couldn't sleep, though. Any crackling noise outside, any creaking, became a sound coming towards us. My muscles were tense throughout. Maybe a half hour later, when the disturbance had stopped, Marcus informed us that we should quietly collect and go, no waiting until morning. He grabbed the machete we'd brought along, just in case, and carried it in front of him. Luckily, the moon was almost full, so we could see without flashlights. As we quickly broke camp, I noticed something beside the campfire that made my stomach turn: an empty beer can. We had not brought beer, and it had not been there when we retired. That meant someone had been nearby us while we were sleeping. We did not talk. We did not slow down. We jammed all of it into the trunk as fast as we could and drove until we were in town again. The whole trip was quiet. Just the rumble of tires on gravel and Marcus gripping the steering wheel too hard. For the rest of the trip, we slept in crammed campgrounds, the family ones with kids on bicycles and tents packed side by side. Or we just picked a cheap motel if we couldn't get anything else. After that night, we didn't care about scenery or vistas. We just needed a door that closed and a front desk we could reach. Even to this day, I still think about what might have happened if we didn't even listen to the noise, or if we went outside when we heard it start. There was something out that night. And whatever it was, I'm just glad it didn't get what it came for. When I was growing up, I absolutely loved camping. It was one of those things that we would do a few times a year, always with a big group of my parents' friends and their kids. Most trips there would be about 10 of us going along, which was always somewhat of an adventure, partly because we had a favorite spot, this secluded lake out in the Montana wilderness. It was not a simple location to reach, yet we kept going back. As it happened, we were not the only individuals who liked that location. There were always a few boats drifting around near the shoreline, and occasionally other campers would set up camp along the water's edge as well. Most of these individuals had families with little children or teenagers who would play around. It was never wild or rowdy, just relaxed and casual, kind of like a de facto family holiday destination. Even though it felt like the middle of nowhere, somebody had built a little building nearby with showers and toilets. I guess the local council got sick of people pissing behind trees and decided to do something about it. One of these trips took place in early spring of 2013. I recall the year specifically because I had adopted my dog Daisy only a few months before that winter. It was a birthday gift to myself. I had gone to the shelter and picked her out in December, paid the adoption fee myself, and brought her home. Reddit. I know you guys love dogs so much, so trust me when I say Daisy is going to be the star of this story. Daisy came into my life as a 6-month-old puppy rescued from a dogfighting ring. We never knew for sure what her breed was, but most thought she was a greyhound pit bull mix. She was very gentle with people and most other dogs despite her background. But if you ever threatened someone she loved, she wouldn't hesitate. By the time that camping trip came around, I'd had Daisy for roughly 4 months. She'd never been camping, but in my family, dogs were part of the adventure. So when we loaded up the SUV to leave, Daisy got in with us. Unlike most of our trips, none of our usual family friends could make it, so it was only my brother Oliver, my dad Mike, my mom Heather, and I. I did not really care about the other children not being there. I preferred hanging out with Daisy anyway, and I still had Oliver to hang out with. The drive out took about 6 hours, and we left later than usual, although I don't remember why. We pulled up to the lake just as the sun was setting below the horizon, which wasn't ideal since it's no fun pitching a tent in the dark. We'd been hoping other campers would already be there, their fires burning on the beach, but when we arrived, the place was completely empty. Despite the eerie silence, my parents started unloading the gear and trying to pitch the tent. Oliver and I were instructed to retrieve the lighter bags from the back of the car as they fumbled to work by flashlight. I rolled the window down a bit for Daisy before I got out. It was warmer than usual for early spring, and I wanted to get her out in some fresh air. I always looked out for her like that. Being there on the sand, alone in the dark with no one else around, made me feel odd. The lone road to the lake wound around it in a big circle, like a gigantic zero, and there was one small bridge on a side that crossed over a little stream. You could actually drive entirely around the lake in a full circle if you wanted to. I wasn't exactly watching the road, just complaining to Oliver about being tired, but my mom was watching. About 15 minutes into our setup, while my dad was still struggling with the tent pegs, Mom whispered to him, asking if he'd noticed a car circling. She said it had gone around a few times already. Dad just shrugged. That's kind of how he is. He doesn't panic easily. I'm not sure if he replied, but just a few minutes later, a car pulled up next to ours. Someone got out. They were about 20 feet away, and with minimal light except for the flashlights, it was hard to make out. We were not expecting anyone, but Mom thought it might be someone from the local forest department. Maybe doing a check, which they did every now and then. But as the man approached closer, we could tell that something wasn't right. He had an unsteady, stumbling sort of walk. It was clear he was drunk or on something. And then, as he stepped into the light, we saw it. He had a huge knife, at least 15 inches long, maybe more. I was only 12 or so at the time, so my sense of size might have been off, but it looked enormous to me. I've had my issues with my dad, but where credit is due, he got up immediately, camping hammer in hand, and stood between us and the man. The man started yelling that we couldn't camp there and he was just letting us know. Dad tried to stay calm, said we'd leave, but the man wouldn't stop. He just kept coming, still shouting. Oliver and I both started crying. I remember shaking so hard, I could hardly stand. It was like anything could break out into violence at any second. And I just didn't think Dad would be able to defend himself. That guy would have hurt or killed him if he had fought back, and probably us too. I do love my mom, but in a situation like that, she always freezes up. She would have stayed instead of running off with us. That's not what happened though. Before any of us could react, something darted out of the shadows like a bolt of lightning, Daisy. None of us even saw her move, least of all the man. She zeroed in on his arm and latched onto it. She tore through his jacket and into the flesh underneath. He dropped the knife right away. She had gotten the arm that he was holding the knife in. He kicked and punched her until she let go, then got up, grabbed the knife, and ran to his car, peeling out into the darkness. Daisy did not pursue him. She stayed behind with us, bleeding from her face. We loaded everything up as fast as we could, tossed it in the car, and jumped in. We were all stunned. I checked Daisy over. Amazingly, she was okay, but something strange caught my eye. The window was rolled down way more than I had left it. The car was an old one, and the windows had those crank handles. We think when she heard the screaming, she jumped up and was able to roll the window down enough to squirm out. You'd think that was the end of it, but it wasn't. Since we couldn't stay there and hotels don't usually accept dogs, my parents decided that we'd just go on back home. First, though, we needed to get gas. The nearest town was not near us, but we traveled in that direction. I rode in the back, trying to clean Daisy up a little with some wet wipes. I already loved her, but what she did that night left me speechless. We pulled into a gas station on the edge of town. It looked like it was closed. Dad pulled up by the sign so he could read the hours. Then, something frightening happened. A voice spoke from the shadows behind a van. It was him. The same man, sitting on his car hood, wiping his bloody arm with tissues. My stomach dropped. Dad didn't wait. He gunned it, and we got out of there. But the problem was, we didn't have enough gas to make it home. The closest town with a station was 60 miles away. Dad thought we'd take a chance and call roadside assistance if we ran out. About 5 minutes into that ride, headlights appeared behind us. It was him again. Same car, same guy. He followed us for nearly an hour, 55 miles of pure terror. The car was perfectly silent. No music, no talking, just the sound of tires on the road and our breath held. The gas gauge had been on empty for 10 miles. We were just barely hanging on. Then, finally, he turned off onto another highway. We pulled into a gas station, filled up once more, and drove the remainder of the way home. My brother and I slept in the back seat. I did not awaken until we were sitting in our driveway. Later, Mom called it in using the non-emergency police number. The man matched the description of a suspect they had for a murder investigation, the officer said, but nothing else was ever heard about it. So what's the moral of the story? Well, aside from hoping I never see that man again, it's just that I love Daisy with all my heart. She's still alive today, older, grayer, and a little slower, but a legend in my eyes. I don't know what came over her that night. Maybe instinct, maybe love, maybe both. She came from a horrible situation, beaten and abandoned, and she saved me. If you're thinking about adopting a dog, do it. They never forget kindness, and sometimes they'll save your life without thinking twice. I paid $90 for her adoption fee. It felt like a fortune when I was a kid, but in retrospect, it was maybe the best thing I ever did.